Hi, Jo.
Hi.
Before we talk about your new record,
Yeah.
I'd like to go back to the beginning quickly.
Quickly?
Quickly, not too long.
I'm joking, it's all right.
You started on the Bassoon, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yes, that question.
How did you arrive at the Bassoon?
I've got really big hands. No, honestly.
Okay.
Honestly, I've got really big hands. I was playing the violin at the time. I must have been about 8 years old. And we did a concert in primary school, and and you could go back to the classrooms afterwards and test out lots of different instruments. And the teacher that I had for the next 10 years or whatever, he was there and he had a bassoon, and I tried it, and I had very big hands, so basically I could reach all the notes, and he was like, wow, not a lot of kids can do that. And I was like, well, check me out with my big hands. So my very long fingers worked in my favour then. And for me, I think even at that age, you know, I'd made the decision to be vegetarian, and, you know, so I was very headstrong, and I wanted to be different.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, what really stuck out was the White Album by the Beatles. And I think probably at a young age, you know, it's quite to see something that's, you know, just quite eye-catching, I think, for a young person. And it's a great record, and it was weird and odd, and it was like, oh right, what's good, you know? I think it.
Sure.
For some reason, I don't know, that just sticks out.
This is going to sound like a silly question maybe, but in hindsight, what made the Beatles so good? That album?
I think they were very experimental, and, you know, I always think of Revolution. I think Revolution #9 is on that one, and you know, they were just really experimental in what they were doing, and, you know, the whole double tracking of the vocals, and you know, and obviously a lot of that was down to George Martin and stuff. But I mean, I think, you know, visually, that record, and, you know, audio. I remember it visually a lot more than I do, you know, audio-wise. But I guess, you know, other things that kind of stuck out for me that made a big imprint was Cat Stevens, you know, and the storytelling nature of Cat Stevens, and, you know, the way his observations, and you know, and I've learnt some kind of interesting things about Cat Stevens recently, because I actually recorded one of his songs. I recorded Father and Son. Okay. And just learned some kind of interesting things about him. And sometimes when you think something's incredibly autobiographical, like you would think that song is, actually turns out that it's not so autobiographical, because he wrote it for a musical that was about the Soviet War, and it was a conversation between a father and a son. And I think everyone's kind of always assumed that conversation was between him and his dad, but and I'm sure there were, you know, maybe there are elements of that. And I think when you're trying to write for something, you always try and bring elements of your own experience into it. So I'm sure that was for him, but I just thought it was interesting that that I thought it was a real conversation between him and his dad, and it turns out it's not at all. So.
Okay. But so this storytelling, did you, well, for instance, did you journal when you were younger, or did you write down thoughts from an early age?
I do remember having a journal at a very early age, and then I remember my brother reading it and going, right, I'm not gonna write in a journal anymore. Right. So, you know, I was always very attracted to words and music, and I had this innate kind of need to express myself, and I think that kind of comes from certain hardships that you have when you're younger days as well. You know, I think if your life is always really easy, then maybe you don't necessarily need feel the need to have that outlet and express yourself in those ways. But I loved words. I loved reading. Okay. I read obsessively. I think I probably read more than I wrote. My dad owned a bookshop as well, I had access to whatever book I wanted, and so I read a lot.
And you mentioned this need for an outlet, and well, do you remember one of the first times that you noticed, the power of music or reading, that it could have such an effect on you?
Yeah, I mean, I never thought about it like that, so I just did whatever came naturally to me, and you know, you just instinctively go towards the things that help you in a certain way, or the things that you want to do. And I found myself just physically attracted to the arts, you know. So whether that be theatre or music, you know, music was obviously a huge thing for me, and something for me that, well, it's a very universal medium anyway. You know, everyone has a relationship with music. You know, everybody on the planet has a relationship with music, and so it's very, very powerful. So I you know, I think it's a constant in your life ever since you know, since you were born. Sorry, what was the original question? I was trying to get it back to the original question then, and then I got lost.
Well, do you remember a time maybe early on when music or indeed reading had that effect on you? Did you?
Yes. So yes, that brings me nicely back to my point. That I think it's one of those things that for me anyway was just a constant in my life. And yes, you know, picking up an instrument, picking up the bassoon or picking up the violin, or deciding to go to that singing class or that group in school. You know, my school was really good at the arts and like exceptional at the arts. So I was just a normal comprehensive school, but I had a lot of opportunities there, and I was really encouraged. And we had a really wonderful headmaster who really encouraged the arts, and you don't always get that, you know, and especially, you know, in the climate that we live in nowadays as well, where, you know, financially, you know, the world is struggling, and the first thing to go is the arts. You know, the funding. I don't know how it is here, but you know, I think, the first thing to go always, isn't it? So, so I consider myself really lucky to have had a lot of access to that, but yeah, just going back to that, there was never a light bulb moment of oh great, this is great. You know, I think it's just a continuous flow of I'm attracted to doing that, or I'm attracted to doing that. That's, you know.
Well, you mentioned the way the arts are the place of the arts in society, and then your first record, I believe you released independently. So this drive to be a musician, where did that come from? Was it early on that you knew, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to waver?
Yeah, I mean, I think in life, you know, we take many, many different turns, and sometimes, you know, we don't always know the path that we're going on, and for me, it wasn't a straight line to get to where I am today. I always knew that music had a huge part to play in my life, but I went to university and I studied drama and theatre. But missed music terribly. I had a really, it was a real primal thing actually, like, oh God, you know, I'm not with music in the same way that I was when I was studying when I was, you know, my A-levels. It wasn't in my life in the same way, and I even though I was obsessed about music outside of my studies, you know, and listened to it, it wasn't in the same way in my life, in that it wasn't as all-consuming as it was before. So I desperately missed that. But I did my degree, and I think when my dad died, that was the kind of turning point for me that went, right, what do I need to do to make myself happy? Because I'm grieving and I'm miserable and this is awful and I don't want to feel like this anymore. And what's going to fulfill me? What's going to kind of make it all right? You know, how am I going to make myself okay? And I think that was a real big driving force to making the changes and going, right, okay, actually it focused me.
Right.
It gave me a focus. And I think probably that's what happens to a lot of artists, is that something happens or events or experiences happen and it helps them to focus in how they enable themselves to come away from that.
Sure.
And that's probably what it was for me.
After your father passed away, do you remember what you did in terms of music? Did you start writing, or did you already write songs?
I did write songs, but not in the same way. They weren't. It wasn't like a focused kind of thing. And actually, when I was, in my teenage years, I was just obsessed with listening to people like Aretha Franklin. I was obsessed with singing other people's songs. I wanted to I wanted to listen to Aretha Franklin and God, like attempt to sing those songs in the way that she does. Obviously, I never could sing them in the way that she did. So there was always that feeling of, oh God, you know, I'm never going to be like her. And so you're comparing yourself to these greats,
Right.
and trying to sing their songs. And even people like Lauryn Hill, you know, I was obsessed with singing and trying to work out all the technique of how she was singing. And yes, I was interested in the songs as well and what she had to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I listened, you know, a lot of the female artists that I listened to had a really powerful voice and a powerful storytelling voice, and their need to tell their story. Or, you know, Dusty Springfield, you know, you feel her, even though she was singing a lot of other people's songs, she was still a very powerful figure in the way that she interpreted them and delivered them. So, yeah, for me, kind of songwriting came later. And when I was at school, I would, me and my friends would kind of write together. But I had one friend who would she was a real songwriter. And so I never really kind of felt like I was a real songwriter in the same way that she was. So I would sing she would write the songs and I would sing the songs. So yeah, for me, it was a later, I came to it later. And certainly after my father passed away, that again, you know, what came with the new focus of this is what I need to do with my life. This is like my calling and what I have to do. Came I need to write songs, and I want to write songs, and I want to express myself, and I want to be real, and I want to be honest, and I want to be sincere, and that's kind of what led me to